Hey folks, this is Neal Bertrand. We'll get to the presentation in a minute. But first, I want to give you the introduction I should have given at this meeting. I admit I was a little nervous and pressed for time, so I completely forgot about giving a little background. I was invited by the president of the Lafayette Genealogy Society in Lafayette, Louisiana, to give this presentation. This was on April 16, 2015. On the front cover of my book is a picture of my father after he was discharged from the U.S. Army Air Force in December 1945. He served with the 863rd Engineer Aviation Battalion and was a part of the 6th Army in New Guinea, Biak, and the Philippines. My dad returned home from World War II in the South Pacific with over 600 photos. These never-before-seen pictures from his private collection, along with official battalion journal entries and stories of near-death experiences, provide the drama, adventure, and depict the reality of war. Dad's War Photos covers many aspects of my dad's experiences, leaving the family farm near Opelousas, Louisiana, going to boot camp, being sent overseas, and coming back home, all through the lens of his Kodak fold-up camera passed down to him from his parents. The homecoming and post-war life chapters give an intimate view of what many returning soldiers faced. For Dad, it was getting back to work on the farm, meeting his lovely wife, my mom, and trying to put bad memories aside. 2 additional sections in the back of the book include extensive photo coverage of World War II aircraft and their oftentimes erotic nose art, and the daily lives of natives in the South Pacific. Would you like a copy of my book? If you live near Lafayette, you can get a copy from Champagne Supermarket in the All Center. If not, you can order it from Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com. If you would like an autographed copy, buy it from my website, dadswarphotos.com. Check out my website for my weekly blog posts on World War II. Here is our presentation.
Well, let's get to the new business of our presentation tonight. This is Neal Bertrand. You've seen all of the publicity that we've run. I'm excited to see it. It's a lot of hard work and devotion of time and probably a very interesting project. No, I'm not going to say anything else. I'm going to let Neal talk about it. Come on up, Neal. Thanks for giving us your time, sir.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to give a presentation. This is, somebody can get the lights so they can see the board.
I'm heading in that direction.
All right. So I'm going to start out with a little genealogy, since this is a genealogy society. Start with the Bertrand ancestry. Gilles Joseph Bertrand was from Saint Brieuc, Brittany, France. He came to Canada as a soldier in the French Army, and he lived in the Montreal area. His son, Aimable, or as the French would say, Aimable Bertrand, was born in 1739 in Montreal. He came to Louisiana and he settled near Plaisance. He was a farmer and he was buried in St. Andrew Catholic Church Cemetery. He fought in the Galvez expedition and he was a corporal in the Opelousas militia of 1777, and he was age 38 at that time. Aimable married twice. Now, being that y'all are in genealogy, I know you'll have had some roadblocks or some tangulations, and well, this guy here is married twice, and each wife was named Anastasia. And they each had a bunch of kids. So talk about a rat's nest to try to untangle that thing. That took me a while. So he had a son named Louis, who was my direct ancestor. Louis had a farm in Lafayette. I found his, I guess you'd call it a census record of what he owned in the 1840, and I found the exact location of where his residence was, and it's right as you enter Lafayette, right across the track. So Amabel's father-in-law was Claude Aucoin, who left France with his family aboard the ship La Ville d'Archangel in 1785. Now here are I have 3 pictures of Amabel's grandsons, and here are 2 of them. The one standing is Homer. He was born in 1850. His big brother sitting down, that's Louis Ozim, born in 1834. And then Auguste is right here with his wife, and they are my great-great-grandparents. Now, her father was Dominique Contini Setig, and he owns what we now know in Washington, Louisiana, the Steamboat Warehouse Restaurant. That was his property. That was his cotton warehouse. Now, you are familiar with DNA, and you are familiar with how all that works and how people can pass on traits from generation to generation. So if 2 people were born 144 years apart, could there be any resemblance to another? This is my son Jeremy, and this is Auguste is his great-great-great-grandfather. And you tell me, does anybody notice a resemblance?
Same guy.
Anyway, let's move on. Now, I've done my genealogy going back 10 generations, and starting at the very top, that's the first generation, and coming on down to the very end. The names in red are those names that are of Basque origination. Does anybody know what I mean by Basque names? Okay. So, my dad, one of the traits of Basque ancestry is a blood type of O. And my dad had an O blood type. So if you see any names on here that you recognize, well, all right, so this is my dad in 1985. He was 65 years old at this time. And so what I'd like to do is take you on a journey across the world to where he was in the military. As you see right here, this is Mallet. Mallet right here, that's where he grew up. That's where he was born, and that's where I lived until I was 3. Then he built a house in Opelousas, and we moved there. So we start our journey. He left from Mallet, and he went to boot camp in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. After spending a month or so in boot camp, he went to his training camp in Geiger Field, Washington State. And after, now this was in the wintertime, this was probably February, March, working in the snow, pitching tents in the snow, learning how to do what his specialty was going to be, which was working with vehicles and heavy equipment, changing the oil, greasing the bulldozers and stuff. So then he comes on down to San Francisco by train. Now, Daddy was 22 years old when he entered the military. So put yourself in his shoes. Here he is leaving San Francisco on a ship. As he is approaching the equator, there is a centuries-old ceremony called King Neptune holding court. And if you look on this little presentation board I made here, there's the original certificate that he got from this hazing ceremony. And part of that ceremony was, well, the enlisted men, which is what he wasn't an officer, they took the shears to their head and gave him a weird haircut, leaving big old clumps of hair, I'm sure, showing. But what emotions do you think he felt? Apprehension? They were putting 30 caliber machine guns on the ship that they were on. So just imagine, well, look, this is getting real here. We're getting ready for war, getting ready for enemies. As they were approaching Australia, Japanese subs were spotted. Would they shoot torpedoes at me? Am I going to die? Am I going to get injured? So this is real. Emotions, fear, apprehension, and so on. Here is sightseeing in Australia. Here is a kangaroo, and the car on the right, on the back end of that car, anybody has a guess as to what that is? That is a coal-burning device where you can burn coal, create steam, and operate your car. And the kangaroo on the left, I don't know, it's a good thing we don't have kangaroos here, or else we'd have kangaroo sauce pecan, kangaroo gumbo, kangaroo chops, and all that. So these are the 3 towns on the eastern coast of Australia. He landed at the very bottom, he landed at Sydney, Australia first. Then he moved on to Brisbane, which was General MacArthur's headquarters. And each move was to be coordinated to make sure all of the supplies and everything that was needed was orchestrated, so that when they finally went up to the top northernmost town, Townsville, they had everything together and they were ready to make the jump across to New Guinea. And so they moved from Townsville to Oro Bay, which near Oro Bay was the area that they had their instructions to make camp, and that is Dobadura. And in Dobadura, they had a series of airstrips that they had to create from scratch so that their airplanes, the bombers, could take off and land and bomb the surrounding areas where the Japanese were. So here's a zoomed in area of the Dobadura airdromes. An airdrome is an old-fashioned way of saying airstrip or airport. Every airdrome had at least one airstrip with taxiways and control towers and so on and so forth. So what's involved in creating airdromes? Well, here on the left side you see a crane emptying a dump truck. On the right side you see a guy operating a bulldozer. And this was Dad's friend, Bill Habits, from Ragley, Louisiana. I contacted Bill Habits' family a few weeks ago. Sad to say that he passed away a few months ago. And he was a farmer. He had experience on bulldozers before he even entered the service, because he had a rice farm and he used that type of equipment. Okay, anybody knows what this is? This is anti-aircraft fire. At nighttime, there were anti-aircraft batteries right there where my dad's battalion was. And when a red alert would come in, everybody would get active and do what they needed to do to either to survive or to fight. But I say right here, what goes up must come down. Well, here you have all of these streaks are shells being fired at planes. And what happened this night was my dad and his bunkmate in their tent, there's 2 men per tent, there was a chunk of metal that fell down through their tent and landed in between them and hit the dirt. So he escaped death, him and his friend escaped death that night. So here he stayed in the Dobadura, Oro Bay area for 4 months. Then it was time to move to another location, and they moved to Sadar. Now you see that island next to it, New Britain Island, and the town called Rabaul. Rabaul was a Japanese base. I would call it a mega base. It was huge, a lot of ships, a lot of airplanes. And what General MacArthur decided to do was not attack Rabaul head on with tremendous loss of life, possibly to the Allied forces. What his plan was, we're going to cordon off that area. We're going to seal it off. We're going to blockade it. And that was called Operation Cartwheel. And so Daddy was part of this, and his battalion was part of this Operation Cartwheel. And so they went from place to place building airstrips. So they go to Sadar, New Guinea, and over a period of, I think it was 2 weeks, they got 24 inches of rain. Well, thankfully, they were able to get to this area and build this bridge over the Nankina River. And this is called the Bailey Bridge. And the H10 means that it could hold up to 10 tons of weight. So after this bridge got finished and completed, the rains came, and like I said, 24 inches of rain fell in 2 weeks. But what happened was the Australians built a bridge, and some other battalions built some, and they were either destroyed or the abutments were washed away. And an abutment is this right here, which the bridge rests on. So here is one of the bridges that Dad's battalion made. So where do you get lumber to create what you need to create? Either a bridge or a control tower, or wood for the carpenters to build, buildings and so on and so forth, the mess tent and all that. Do you call Doug Ashley or St. Andrew Lumber and say, hey, we need some stuff. We need 250 beams 50 feet long. Well, in a way, yes. They called their company Sawmill. They had their own sawmill, and this is to me, very interesting. Here you have the saw, and there's a tree on this that they had started cutting. The logs are rolled from the truck. There's a truck right here, if you can tell. The truck is backed up to this stack of logs. There's a winch on a pole here that they winch the logs out. They roll the logs toward the saw, cut the saw. The finished planks are put in this truck back here and driven to the job site wherever they need the lumber. On the left side, you have New Guinea natives with their axes chopping down this tree. And it kind of looks like a cypress tree because it's kind of splayed out toward the root. And so you don't want to cut way down there, so they built a platform to where they could cut where the tree was more even. And on the right side is my dad holding a gun. You know what kind of gun that is? Tommy gun. A Thompson submachine gun. Now Dad was about 6 foot tall, and look how tall or short these guys are. About 4.5. This guy here on the left is about 4.5 feet, I reckon. Now, when they're building an airstrip, you don't let the planes land on just dirt or mud. You have pierced steel planking. Another term for that is Marston matting. And these are interconnected planks that you just, they connected with a steel clip so they don't come loose. Here's an one of the airstrips that I'll get to in a minute, they were in an island called Biak. The airstrip on Biak was 7,000 feet long by 100 feet wide, plus they had a network of taxiways and so on and so forth. Here is an officer, Lieutenant Betson. He is pulling a packer, and he is packing a hard standing, what they call a hard standing. Other companies of Italians call them hard stands, which is a parking spot for an airplane. The parking spot, that hard standing, had to be prepared with rocks, gravel, dirt, in layers so that it would be a firm foundation for the plane so they wouldn't sink down. So he's doing a job of packing. Also, if your plane is parked in your parking spot right here, you need to have a levee of protection. They call that a revetment. And so the bulldozers and packers are building this revetment or levee. And the reason for that is if the Japs came in and dropped a bomb and blew up a plane, you don't want the burning pieces and all that to destroy the plane next to it and the parking spot next to it. So they had these barriers all over their parking lot, which they called a dispersal area, where all the planes were dispersed or parked. Here is an actual graphic of the dispersal area at an airdrome in the island of Biak. It looks like a curved up zipper, but each one of these black dots is a parking spot. Each one of these little nodes, you see that it's separated by white space. Well, these are all, this is a taxiway with all these little nodes or parking lots for the plane. And then down at the bottom here was the actual runway. So here is their trip from Sadar, New Guinea to the island of Biak. It looks like a little small thing, insignificant, but I'll tell you what, when they got to Biak, they had a surprise waiting for them. This is Makmur Airdrome on the very southern tip of the island. There were 3 airdromes that the Japanese made that General MacArthur commanded his officers, you need to capture these 3 airdromes and build them back up to U.S. Allied specifications as far as quality, length, and all of the things required so the U.S. planes could land and do their job of bombing the enemy. Now you'll see right here, this is a plateau. This whole line right here is a 200-foot rise from the beach. It rises 200 feet. And on top of that plateau were pillboxes. Anybody know what a pillbox is? Raise your hand. Okay. What we think of as a pillbox is what you would see in like the movie Saving Private Ryan. On D-Day, they come up to the beach, and you have these big, huge concrete fortifications with 20-foot long cannons shooting at people. Well, here on this island, the pillboxes, they didn't have concrete. So, well, I take it back. Maybe some of them were, but the Japanese had 2 to 2.5 years to prepare for the invasion. So what they did have was they made pillboxes out of coconut logs, cut down coconut trees and palm trees and use that. So here you have the coastal cliffs and caves, and I have a picture of that in my book. This is where the Japanese were hiding out in these caves with their mortars and their machine guns and rifles and causing havoc for the people down below who were trying to, drive their bulldozers and graders and make these airstrips. Here we have 2 pieces of military equipment. The one on the left, they call it a Duck W-353. That's a 6-wheeled amphibious vehicle made by General Motors. And then the 2 on the bottom are called Buffaloes, and they are tracked vehicles, like tracks that you found on a bulldozer. So, and the one on the bottom, we have 2 or 3 men servicing that machine. Here, when Dad arrives on the island of Biak, like I said, the Japanese were waiting for them. They had been preparing 2 years for the invasion. And so when my dad and his battalion arrived, up on the hill that I showed you, there was cannons shooting at them, and one shell hit on it didn't hit the ship that they were on, but it hit the coral in the water, exploded the coral, and it wounded 2 men who were climbing over the landing net over that ship. And one of those pictures of the wounded man is in my book also. Here is a pillbox made out of logs, and the Japanese would get inside there and shoot at the Americans or Allies whenever they approached. However, since this was a nuisance to the officers to have people, the enemy up there on this hill, they decided they were going to take care of business. His battalion was an engineering battalion. It was the 863rd Engineer Aviation Battalion. The engineers took some infantrymen with them. They went up to the top of that hill, took explosives, and they blew up the pillboxes and killed a bunch of enemy. One of those officers had a last name of Chasson, and I don't know if he was from Louisiana or not, but it's like a Louisiana name. Here's one of these Jap cannons that was on top of that hill, that plateau, and that's one of the guns that shot at my father's ship, trying to kill him and his buddies. Here's a Japanese bomb dump that they found after they cleared out that whole top of that plateau. They found a bunch of good things, vehicles and other things that the Japanese didn't need anymore. Here is a picture Daddy took. One of the artists thought he'd have some fun with this, and this is a captured or destroyed Japanese truck, and he wrote on the side of the door, "Tojo's miscarriage," and below that it says, "So sorry, please." Here's another Japanese truck. As you can tell, there's some huge bullet holes through there. And this looks like an Australian soldier taking a rest on the running board. And they also had entertainment. coming to the island of Biak. August 1944, there was a well-known entertainer that came and put on a USO show. Does anybody recognize who this man is signing an autograph?
Bob Hope.
Bob Hope.
Recognize his nose.
There's the nose right there. So Daddy, that's how close Daddy got to Bob Hope. This is his plane, a C-54 Skymaster, and that's his whole entourage was flying on that plane. All right, so it's time to leave Biak and move on. So here they are loading their tanks and equipment and bulldozers and graders and everything they use on the island. They loaded up 2 LSTs. This is an LST, and that's an abbreviation for a landing ship tank. And on my website, you can go to dadswarphotos.com. I have a blog on there, and one of my blog posts I did an explanation of what LSTs were and how do you get a bulldozer from the beach onto the top deck. Well, it shows you how. All right, so the next stop is the Philippine Islands. So they are about to go to Samar. See that little bitty fig teach right there? They go into that area right there from Biak. And this is their journey. This is to give you an idea of how far they had to go. And so they stopped on Calicoan Island to help the Navy build a beach road. And they stayed there a few days. They had to dynamite some of the area on the beach because it was full of coral obstructions. And so after they finished that, they went to San Pedro Bay, and they took this. From there, they went up through this channel on up to northern Luzon. So they traveled to Luzon, where a battle is in progress, and this is the Battle of the Lingayen Gulf. Has anybody ever heard of that? No. All right. The Battle of the Lingayen Gulf. Picture this. You're on the top of this LST, and you're traveling, and you're looking out in the distance, and you see a whole fleet of battleships, and you see Japanese kamikaze pilots flying their planes into these battleships to catch them on fire and hopefully sink them. This is what was going on. And so they finally, they approached their landing zone in that area, the Lingayen Gulf, and that landing zone is 20 miles wide, full of tanks and equipment and graders unloading. And there it is right there. I'm pointing to, there's an arrow pointing to the Lingayen Gulf. And when they arrive, the Japanese were leaving. Here's Manila. The Japanese were leaving, and as they left, they blew up everything they could. All of the railroad bridges, regular bridges, and other things, so that they wanted the infrastructure to be totally wasted. And that's what happened. That's what the Japanese did. So they're approaching, they're making their way from northern Luzon, their landing area, to Manila. And their job was to kick the enemy out of Manila. While this was going on, the Japanese were slaughtering the civilians. Over 100,000 Filipino civilians were massacred. So the Japanese had barricaded themselves, so to speak, inside what's called the walled city of Manila. And to that the walls were 20 foot high and about 40 to 50 feet thick at the base. This is one of the guns that helped to poke holes in that wall. Let me show you here. Okay, this shell that this gun could shoot, it could shoot a 360-pound shell. Can you imagine how heavy that is? And take a guess how far it could shoot it. How many miles?
0.8.
14 miles. Good guess. 14 miles. All right, so here is the supply dump. Now, the Philippines were what's called a possession, a U.S. possession. And so they were obligated to repair what the Japanese had destroyed. So this is the supply dump on the North Harbor of Manila. And on the back of this picture, my dad wrote a caption. He said, "Need wire?" Question mark. So these are tons and tons of wire and other supplies needed for the rebuilding effort. Now, Appendix 1 of the book has 14 types of World War II airplanes that my dad took pictures of. What I did for each of these 14 types, such as the B-24 bomber, the B-17, the P-40, and so on and so forth, I wrote an article about what the purpose of each plane was, what the armament was, how many guns each plane had, and so on and so forth. Now, this guy here on the right is Jacques Vautier. He was the pilot of this plane here called Hung Lo, which was a B-25 Mitchell bomber. And you'll see on the artwork on that bomber carries I guess you'd say the logo or the emblem of the Bats Out of Hell squadron. Jacques Vautier and my dad were good friends. Jacques' father was a salesman for Church Point Wholesale. My dad's father owned a grocery store that bought from Mr. Vautier. So they played together, I'm sure, during the summer times. And anyway, when Daddy found out that Jacques Vautier got shot down in this plane here, he took it really hard. All right, now Appendix 2 has New Guinea natives, scenes from daily life, and these are pictures that you would probably see something similar in National Geographic. Okay? You know what the women wear in New Guinea? Probably nothing above the waist. All right? And they either wear grass skirts or some of them wear cloth skirts. So we're going to play a little game right here. We're almost done. We'll play a little game. What I did was, each of these pictures that I will show you, it has a caption. Okay? And these are captions that I had a funny guy that I know. I asked him to write something funny about these pictures. So instead of showing you the picture and the caption, I'm going to show you the caption first, let you think about it, and then we'll show you the picture, okay? All right, this should be fun. The natives were great at making killer bombs. Goat skin bras, not so much. Now, I did this presentation in Opelousas a month ago, and nobody knew what a bong was. And for those who are not quite sure what that is, so saying, that's what the people who smoke marijuana, it's like a pipe of some sort. They put it in there and do their thing, but I've never done all that, so I wouldn't know. All right, so here's the picture. You're kind of in awe, I guess. Huh? Well, the lady on the left is, she's all bonged out, I guess. And the woman on the right is nursing something. Can you tell what it is? It's a pig. Shock and awe. All right, let's move on before y'all faint. All right, this one, let's check out the puppies on that one. All right, goodness gracious, what's going to happen now? Ready? New Guinea natives in daily life. Breastfeeding 2 puppies. All right. Here's another one. Does anybody know what Google Maps is or has ever used Google Maps? 3 of y'all, okay. You go to Google Maps, or I do, and I want to know, well, how do I get from here to Mammoth? Well, they'll show me the exact route and all that.
Can't get there from here.
And so, I don't know if you can tell from where you see it, but they have tattoos all over their body. So, that's the punchline. They're all tattooed up, and they're drawing maps all over their body. When you get to the big rock, you turn right. You get to that tree, you turn to this hand. All right. Okay. Okay, I'm ready to clean the latrine now. You better be prepared. You don't know what kind of big eye you'll find in that latrine. All right, last one. All right, imagine this. You're walking through the jungle. You got deer and buffalo all around. You hear the birds chirping. Then all of a sudden you hear a loud noise. Oh my God, you whisper, what was that? I think I heard a buck snort. So you turn the corner to see it's Bub, but it wasn't a snort. All right, that's the end of the slideshow. I brought some souvenirs here, and I have a presentation panel that I've created over here on this side that shows all of these things that my dad brought back. The King Neptune, the actual King Neptune certificate that he brought back. I have a copy of that. Some Japanese money that was issued in the Philippines, and so on and so forth. And right here I have his canteen, a belt he brought back from Manila, a plane that was made out of a bullet casing, and the actual camera he used to take these 800 pictures. So here's the canteen. When me and Daddy went work on the farm during the summertime, I was out of school. This was our igloo. This is what we had to carry water back in the 60s. Here's the belt. There's an engraving on the front. This was on the way back from Manila aboard ship. They had 2 weeks to kill time doing something. So they killed time gambling, playing dominoes, or whatever. Others were creative. They took a bullet shell and cut a notch in the bottom and the top, and they have a little plastic propeller here and wings. And I played with this when I was a kid, and you can see I was pretty rough with it. Bent that little rod. Here I have the actual New Guinea armband that was made by the New Guinea natives out of vegetation. I have his good conduct, the actual good conduct medal that he won, and a metal ribbon that went on his uniform. And this is the camera that he used It opens up like this. And here is the viewfinder. You look through here, then you press the clicker to take the picture. And this camera is, let's see, the name of it is number 1A Pocket Kodak Jr., made in the USA by Eastman Kodak, Rochester, New York. This thing endured sub-zero temperatures in Geiger Field, where they were training in Washington State, to the extreme of when they were on the equator on the island of Biak. 135 degrees was the official temperature recorded at the airdrome. And he had a leather case made for this to put the camera in here. And on the outside, you see this map of the South Pacific where he was. Any questions?
What kind of film did you use? 120?
I have no idea.
Shows the road.
And this camera, they stopped making the camera in 1935, about 7 or 8 years before he went into the war. So this was, I guess, a hand-me-down that his parents gave him. Anything else? If not, that's it. Y'all can take a look at
There's no other business, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. So moved, so second? Second. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for braving the weather.
Thank you, we really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
But I don't know where it's from.
I grew up in Opelousas.
Opelousas, you go for church one?
I have been to church when I used to sell my books at Rob's.
Okay.
Rod Supermarket.
You know the Hill Bible?
There's one guy I know, I think he was a Higginbottom, and I worked with him back in the 80s, around 88. He was at the post office, we worked together at the Mall Street Post Office. And then he got a job, probably in Tribune, I'm not sure exactly. But if I remember correctly, he had a high-pitched voice.
No, mine is very deep, very French. Well, how did you get your poster? I mean, that was very
I gave the images to Lowry's printing, and they have a sign shop where they print long strips. So each one of those 3 panels is a strip that they glued to that foam.
That is pretty nice.
So they organized it on some software to make collage stuff. So they did it on their computer first, then they printed it out. And that's how I did it.
Are you ready to say what's back? Karen Crow. We didn't think we were going to make it.
Well, thank y'all for coming.
It was raining back.
Enjoyed it?
Yes, we did. Didn't want to miss.
Good. You a member of the?
Yes, we are. I'm the president, she's the
I don't know what I
treasurer, or whatever, the one in Karen.
Oh, is that right? Well, I went there once.
She gave me a business card and I got, it's in our big pile of stuff.
That might be
Couldn't
where you
find it.
remember me from, because I went one time.
He did.
I went when who's that guy? Barry Onstad. And he's
And you gave me a business card and said something about, because I remember you said that you worked for a printing shop or
Cypress Cove Publishing.
publishing, yeah. That, remember I told you I couldn't find that card, but I knew.
That's where,
See?
yes. We just published the book also. We went
Really?
through it.
Well, it was through Arcadia, though. They
These
told us.
are all my books that I have.
Oh, okay, good.
And,
May I have one of those?
We're gonna keep that so we can get one.
you can go to Amazon. The book is on Amazon, or you can go down to Champagne's, the Hall Center.
Oh, I'll work
Oh,
right
the
there.
all, yeah.
Good deal.
So Champagne's, I was there a few days ago. They had 10 copies,
Okay,
so you can get one in the morning.
okay, good deal. Thank
I'll
you.
get one order, Amazon, whatever.
Okay, thank you so much.
If I can find you again, just
Thank you.
have you sign it.
Curtis,
Use that for.
that's your dad?
Let's find the grave photo. I don't know if you're familiar with that site, Find the Grave, but I created that before.
So that's the only picture you have?
Well, it's not other of that time period.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's been his time. My aunt just told me that he served, he was in the wrong.
Okay.
He never talked about
Right.
it.
Well, it was traumatic,
I'm sure,
and they'd rather just forget.
I'm sure.
Those amphibious vehicles? I don't know about that one. The ones that they use for D-Day?
Thank you.
Those that they use for D-Day?
Yes, the Higgins book.
Oh, here's something else.
Yep.
Monsieur Bertrand, thank you very much. Okay. Where did you move to when you left college?
Well, moved to Parkview Drive in Opelousas,
Okay.
the South Railroad.
You grew up in St. Andrews.
I grew up there. And then in 1975, I gave a presentation in Al Marie.
Oh, wow.
She was the one who
She wrote books.
she wrote 3 books.
Okay.
So,
You okay here? Do you need some help?
Is there
I would like to have some help.
a genealogy society or it was a Kiwanis club or something?
Probably so.
Who did you give the presentation to?
It was at the library.
In the library, okay.
There you go. Yeah, the Oculus Eunice Public Library.
Neal, this just folds up here?
Yes, sir, just folds up like that.
This is so very well done here. Who did this book?
I gave Lars this training, the